Good afternoon. My name is Jared Burguan, Jarrodburguan. I'm the police chief here in San Bernardino. With me is our district attorney, Mike Ramos, as well as our sheriff, John McMahon, sheriff of San Bernardino County. And I've got a couple of our detectives from the San Bernardino Police Department that are up here as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the case that we have as the investigating agency. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Ramos. He can talk about the prosecution component associated with this case. And then we're going to end it by turning it over to Sheriff McMahon to talk about the victim. This incident started on New Year's Eve, December 31st, a little bit before 11 o'clock in the afternoon. And it started as a simple traffic collision. It elevated from there into a felony assault case. And then as of 8:08 last night, it turned into a murder investigation. The victim in this case, his name is Larry Falce, F-A-L-C-E. He is 70 years old. He is a resident of San Bernardino, and at the time of his death last night, he was an active deputy sheriff with San Bernardino County. The suspect in this case is Alonzo Smith, 30 years old, also a resident of San Bernardino. The facts as we know them on the investigation in this case is that Larry Falce was driving his red Chevy pickup eastbound on Kendall Avenue, going through the intersection at University Avenue. The suspect in this case, Alonzo Smith, was driving a 2002 Ford Explorer, traveling behind Mr. Falce. It appears that based upon witness statements that there was a dog or a couple of dogs that had entered the roadway, and Mr. Falce had either stopped or applied his brakes to avoid hitting the dogs. And him slowing down to avoid hitting the dogs resulted in Mr. Smith rear-ending him. Both cars then pulled over against the curb line there on Kendall Avenue, and they got out. Video footage that we have is and confirmed by witness statements as well is that they had gotten out. There was an interaction that took place for about 50 seconds, and then for reasons that are unknown, but clearly on the video and through witness statements, Mr. Smith punched Mr. Falce one time in the face. Mr. Falce went down. We believe that he was knocked unconscious almost immediately, and he never did regain consciousness. There are some witnesses that got involved. They tried to stop Mr. Smith from leaving, but he ultimately got into his vehicle and he left, and the police were called. Mr. Falce was transported to Loma Linda University Medical Center, where he remained until he passed away last night from the injuries that he had sustained. Through the investigative efforts of our detectives, initially this was a patrol response, and then we realized pretty quickly into the investigation that it was going to be pretty extensive, and there was going to be a lot of work to do on this case. We called in our homicide team to start working the investigation. They have worked this almost nonstop since this incident on the 31st. The night of the incident, by the night of the 31st, we actually had Mr. Smith in custody, and he was charged with assault. Of course, they have continued to do a great deal of follow-up up to that point, and then last night when Mr. Falce passed away, the charges were amended to murder. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our district attorney and let him talk about the prosecution component.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, and I want to thank the San Bernardino Police Department for the excellent investigation which allowed us today to file murder against the individual Alonzo Smith for the murder of Deputy Lawrence Falce. We also will be adding enhancements. We've already added an enhancement, but I will indicate to you that this Alfonso Smith, this defendant in this matter, we consider a career criminal, an admitted gang member. A gang member, and one of the enhancements that we are looking at, who went to state prison for selling marijuana and admitted that he was a gang member, but they're going to be looking for a way out for that. You see, with murder, you can go 25 to life, and this person needs to spend the rest of his life in prison. We need to get this career criminal off the street that's been in prisons and jails ever since he was able to be tried as an adult. But now, because of Prop 64 and all the liberals up in Sacramento, they're going to fight that. They're going to fight that as they indicate to you these are non-serious, non-violent felonies. I am sick as the DA from San Bernardino County having to deal with these people, especially when they take the life of one of our community members, our deputy. And we're going to fight like hell to make sure that enhancement sticks. And I don't care what we have to do if we have to take it all the way to the California Supreme Court. I get tired of this. I'm human, we're human too. They have families, these officers, and they have to deal with this when we all go home and you go home. And I'm going to guarantee you that we're going to hold this person responsible. I have the best lawyers assigned to it, my chief, the lead of my gang unit, Mike Selham, and we're still doing investigation on this individual. This isn't over. I'm blessed that I have a wonderful chief here and a wonderful sheriff who's going to share with you the most important part of this investigation. Not this crook, but the victim.
Thanks, Mike. The last couple days have been extremely difficult for our department. Last night, we lost a generous and caring man. Deputy Larry Falce succumbed to his injuries he sustained on Sunday, December 31st. He was removed from life support shortly before 8 o'clock last night and died shortly thereafter. Following his passing, you witnessed a tremendous showing of support for Larry and his family. I want to thank all the deputies, the fire personnel, the officers, and Loma Linda medical staff who showed their care and support by following the escort to the coroner's office as the family plans his funeral arrangements. Larry should be remembered as an honorable man who dedicated his entire adult life to his country, the United States Army, and then 36 years serving the citizens of San Bernardino County as a deputy sheriff with our department. He was a hardworking deputy who spent 32 years at the Central Station in San Bernardino, taking care of the citizens in the community where he was raised. He also coordinated the East Valley Search and Rescue for the last number of years as well, working with our volunteers who spend countless hours looking for those that are lost or in danger in the mountains or other areas in our county. He was a mentor and a great partner to countless deputies who had the privilege to work with him, and he'll truly be missed. He's survived by his sister Marjorie and his girlfriend of many years, Deborah, as well as other extended loved ones. I want to thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers during this difficult time for our organization. Thank you.
So with that, we'll take a couple questions.
Can I ask the question whether or not you can respond to it? If anyone can comment with Mr. Ramos. We understand, looking at the records, this guy Smith had been convicted, was supposed to serve 12 years, and in early 15 was released on a technicality for this crime. Is that true?
That's very true. Another very frustrating factor is the laws regarding gangs is interpreted and given this, I'll say, liberal slant to help these gang members. Back then, he was a gang member with a handgun, with a weapon. He was convicted of a street terrorism with the use of a gun, and the appellate courts decided under the case of Rodriguez that because the gang member was by himself without another gang member in the car, that you couldn't hold him responsible for that crime because a gang member has to have somebody else with him.
So he was released in early 15?
He was released. He had already served time in prison. When the case was reversed, then he was released from prison.
Does that express some of the anger that you have? I mean,
Absolutely. We're having to deal with that all the time. They continue to go after our enhancements. They continue to take away our tools to fight gang members, these local terrorists. And it's very, very frustrating. And look what happens in results like this. It's something that needs to change.
When was he sentenced? When was he?
I believe he was sentenced in 2012, I believe it was. He was sentenced to 12 years, and then the case was reversed. That's correct.
And what sort of crime was this that was?
Gang member, street terrorism, and possession of a gun. That's the crime.
Is there any way that the officer, did he say anything that he was an officer, number one? Did he talk about that? And since he was arrested in San Bernardino the first time, was there any way that he might have known him? And did the suspect say something on the gang member and then he punched him?
So very early on in the investigation, that is one of the rumors that was associated with this. Through our investigative efforts, we do not have anything at this point to indicate that there was ever any identification as a peace officer. But part of what our folks continue to work on is, obviously because of Larry Falce's history as a deputy, we've got to go back and look at all those and see if there was ever a chance that there would have been an encounter that he should have known that he was a law enforcement officer, which could potentially change the dynamic of what this case is. We just haven't done all that work. Up to this point, we don't have any indication that that's the case.
Was this guy known to, maybe not you personally, but to your guys out in the street, or the sheriff, either one, was he someone that?
Well, he's as the DA indicated, he's a career criminal. He's been arrested by our agency several times. He's been arrested by the sheriff's department several times.
So it's very, as you said, it's very possible that he may have seen him or known him.
It is possible, yeah.
Mike, if someone comes forward and says, I was a witness, I heard Deputy Falce identify himself as a peace officer,
Yeah.
how much time do you have for something like that to happen so you could amend the charges to murder on a peace officer?
Well, we have the time that takes up to the time he is either convicted of this murder charge. We still have time available to do that. Again, as the chief indicated, there's an ongoing investigation. We're looking at all different angles, all different witnesses, again, with the excellent work of the police department.
The man in the white truck that's on the video, I want to make sure we get the scenario correct. He gave him he rammed him, and then was Smith arrested on that spot, or did he get away after that?
No, he got away. So the person that you see in that white SUV or white pickup truck that rammed him as he was leaving, that's one of our witnesses. Did the best that he could to try to intervene in that particular case and come to the aid of the victim when he was down, and had somewhat of a confrontation with the suspect and then tried to stop him from leaving. The suspect was able to get away. He was not picked up until many, many hours later that night, or actually the following morning, we had tracked him down.
Hadn't been for that action, Chief, would it have been more difficult to get him? I mean, is he considered a hero in this case?
I think we have been very impressed by what he did, and I think that this is also a case, and it's important to highlight that what made this case truly solvable at the end of the day was the fact that Good Samaritans and witnesses came forward with very critical information. And people after this collision were able to get a good suspect description of a vehicle and provide a good suspect vehicle description, a plate, as well as a suspect description itself, which was incredibly helpful to the detectives that worked on the case.
Toured the ID who he is, he came from forward and gone.
Yes, we've had people
Where was he arrested?
at a girlfriend's residence in San Bernardino.
That same night or the next day?
What time exactly did we get him?
It was that evening.
That evening, yeah.
Chief, did you detain his brother at one point, or arrest his brother?
We did. Well, at one point, as a course of the investigation, and we were trying to figure out people that were associated with that particular vehicle, at one point, his brother was identified as being associated with the vehicle with a very, very similar description as to what the suspects or what the witnesses had provided. We had learned later on through the course of the investigation that the picture of the suspect itself that we had on file had changed over the last several years, and he actually had a very similar, which is what pointed in that direction.
So it wasn't a twin? The rumors that did a twin?
No, they're not twins.
Mike, I'm not familiar with, I think you said Proposition 64.
Yeah.
I'm familiar
Yeah.
with 47
Sure.
and 56. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, it's another one of those, changes in dynamics in the state of California that is making it a place that's not as safe as it used to be. Prop 64 was the proposition that was pushed by some folks up in Sacramento to get rid of strikes on 3 strikes cases. If it wasn't a serious or violent felony, then Prop 64 says you can't use that as a strike. For example, at the time, gang members selling marijuana, a felony with the use of a gun, could have been a strike. Because of Prop 64, that creates a huge issue. And it goes back to the another analogy, the people that commit multiple thefts, and they had prior robberies and prior assaults, but because the last count was multiple thefts, a felony, but not a, quote, non-serious violent, you can't strike that. It can't be a 3-strike. And their whole rationale was, well, these people aren't going to commit serious or violent crimes. Well, you can see, yes, they do, because they forget to take into account their entire history and their record, such as this individual. It's an ongoing investigation. part of that investigation is witnesses. And we want to make sure that we protect the integrity of the case for both sides, as well as the defense.
And the conviction that was overturned was what? He was going to serve a long time and then he wasn't.
He was going to serve 12 years for the street terrorism with a gun as a gang member.
And they ruled that they overturned it because?
Because they said that you could not file that charge because he was alone in a car with a gun, even though he admitted, even though he had tattoos, and he was a gang member, because the law changed under the case of Rodriguez. It said if you're going to file something like that, you need at least 2 gang members.
Can you go over or reiterate the crimes that he's committed? You said since he could legally be charged as an adult.
Right. Well, we've already talked about 2. One is the one he just talked about, the reversal because of the Rodriguez issue. The other one is the sale of marijuana as an admitted gang member. And he has other misdemeanor charges, other arrests, et cetera. But those were the 2 felonies, the felonies that he went to state prison on.
Sheriff, this has to really be especially galling to you and for all your members. I mean, here's a guy who's been on the street for all these years, never got injured, never got hurt. Do you think he was recognized by this guy? Do you have any feeling, or do you want to even go that way?
We don't have any information to suggest or support that at this point. But as Chief Burguan indicated, they're continuing to do their investigation to see if there is any nexus between the 2 of those. And as I indicated, Larry worked the street in the San Bernardino area for 32 years. That's a long time. And he was a very productive, proactive deputy sheriff that loved his job and was committed to helping the citizens of this county, and specifically in the city of San Bernardino.
You don't see a lot of people who are 70 years old and still on the streets. What does that
You don't.
say about it?
You don't, Rob. Absolutely you don't. What it shows is that he had a passion for this career and a passion for taking care of the citizens. He loved doing what he does. He looked forward to coming to work every day. Matter of fact, I talked to one of our janitors this morning over at the headquarters building. He hasn't been there very long, but he was devastated by the news of Larry's passing. And as I say, he's only been with us for about a month or 2. But he said he used to see Larry every morning at coffee. And he asked Larry, he said, you're up there in years, but you're still driving a patrol car and being a deputy sheriff every day. He says, that's because I love doing what I do. And he was able to do his job with the ability and knowledge that he had and do an extremely good job every day.
Okay, that's going to wrap it up. We got our PIO folks that'll be around for some additional questions. Thanks for coming, folks.